Hi folks, and today I'm going to talk about a couple of keys for most people to be a better runner, and those two keys are consistency and recovery. It's hard to hold these straight when you're looking at yourself, but consistency and recovery are two big keys to better running. So let's first take a look at consistency. So consistency means more often than not. Consistently doesn't mean that you never miss a run, doesn't mean that you never miss a pace. I mean, things happen, life happens. Your running does not need to be perfect. But over some time, you've got to be able to say that I'm getting my runs done, I'm getting the prescribed effort done, distance, whatever, more often than not, and really a lot more often than not, you're getting it done. That's really what consistency is. So don't worry about the occasional missed run, missed pace, whatever. Those things are going to happen. So why is consistency so important? Well, a training cycle typically lasts about 4 to 6 weeks. So for most people, in a 4 to 6 week period, you can raise your fitness up a notch or get it back to where it was a notch, etc. But that's 4 to 6 weeks of consistent training. And when things happen that cause there to be lots of interruptions with that, it's very difficult to get a consistent training cycle. That training cycle might be 6 to 10 weeks instead of 4 to 6 weeks, or there might be a lack of consistency in there that means it really doesn't happen at all. But that's why consistency is so important, is you want that 4 to 6 weeks of consistency to try and improve your fitness. Now, in those 4 to 6 weeks, it's important that you get the right effort and the right recovery. So sometimes people are running consistently, but they're not getting the right effort or they're not getting the right recovery, in which case training doesn't really occur in those 4 to 6 weeks. So let's first look at what is training. So training is simply stress. When you are doing training, you are trying to create some type of stress within your body. The stress you're normally creating is going to be a little bit like a hurricane, as I'm going to use as an example, hopefully not quite that severe. But when a hurricane comes through, do you ever see the city, state, whatever, go back in and start rebuilding everything during the hurricane? No, they wait till after the hurricane is over, and then they come in and they rebuild the roads, the buildings, everything else. Your body is the same way. It's going to happen after you have that. But if you don't have the right recovery to react to that stress, then things never get rebuilt, and that's a really bad thing. Now, there are two ways that you can recover. There is what's referred to as active recovery, and then there's flat-out rest. And a lot of times people think that to recover, they have to flat-out rest, and there's certainly a time when you need flat-out rest, but generally speaking, during training, you don't necessarily have to rest. For example, I generally do something 7 days a week, but there's some active recovery in there that allows me to get the proper recovery as opposed to full rest. Nothing wrong with full rest, but just saying you can be doing stuff all the time if you want. So let's go back and talk about what stress is. In general, stress is going to come from duration or intensity, meaning you're doing a duration that you haven't done before or maybe you don't typically do. A common thing with that is, say, long runs when you're marathon training, getting longer and longer. We're increasing that duration. That's the stress that your body is incurring, is you're running more than you usually run. There's also intensity, how fast you're running. That's another type of stress that gets created with the body. In general, if you're not doing anything with duration or intensity, you're kind of holding even as opposed to building up and getting there. Now you can have that active recovery. So if your active recovery is low duration for you, low intensity for you, then you can be recovering a little bit while you're doing some exercise. But there's nothing wrong with doing full-out rest. Not trying to convince you not to do full-out rest, just saying that you can do both. The next thing to look at is, so when do I recover? And people tend to think, well, I got to recover the next day. It depends upon what you're doing. Now, if you just did a 20-mile long run for the first time in several months, yeah, you probably got to recover the next day, but it's not always. Generally, that window of recovery is 24 to 72 hours, depending upon what you've done, but you do need to get that recovery in there. So I might typically do, say, track work on one day and maybe some tempo work on the next day, but then have 2 easy days after that. It varies by the person, it varies what you're doing, but it's really about a 24 to 72 hour window depending upon what you've had done. But really, as I said at the beginning, it comes down to, as long as you've got good consistency and you've also got good consistency in your recovery, you can probably be a better runner.